Welcome back to another episode of Wrist Check Podcast. Tonight, we got a very, very special guest. We're also in a very special place. We're in Geneva, Switzerland.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. Made it all the way out to the Mecca of watches.
Yes.
Just to hang out with our good friend, designer, Ini Archibong.
Hello, friends. Welcome to Switzerland.
Thank you.
Welcome.
This has been some time in the making.
Yeah.
We initially connected via Instagram, and then what was funny was when we went to Miami for Art Basel. I was hanging out with our friend Ronaldo, who has been on the show, the king of quartz watches, and we were hopping around visiting a couple of different places. And I hit up a mutual friend of ours, Larry, who I didn't know you knew, but now I'm starting to discover Larry knows everybody.
Larry knows everybody. Literally everybody.
Yes.
And so we linked up at some venue, and he's like literally like standing behind me at one point. I'm like, who's this tall dude? And we start talking. And it's Larry's, oh, you should meet him. And then we start talking. And then as we're talking, we both realize, we know each other.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that we were able to make it out and have you on the show. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We've been running around Switzerland, cutting it up. And I'm excited.
Too.
Yeah, for the first time. I'm excited to talk about your career and some of what you've been up to in addition to your watch collecting. Because as we've discovered, you are a watch collector.
Yes.
Something like that.
Yeah. But before we get into that, we have to have what is our honorary wrist check.
Yes.
And as is tradition, we kick it off with the man who never repeats a watch. Mr. Rashawn Smith, what do you got on today?
So I'm wearing a very, very special timepiece.
So you're repeating a watch?
Yes, as they all are.
Got you.
And this timepiece, I would love to kind of rebrand as my identity.
Oh, okay.
I am wearing the tried and true Rolex Cellini.
Nice.
The Danos.
Beautiful.
Obviously, this watch holds sentiment to me as much as I've shared on the show. And my first time being in Switzerland, just adding more memories to this piece. Especially when we get into your story, the idea of design and concept. And really what drew me so much to this timepiece was the fact that they did a two-tone precious metal.
Right.
For the Cellini line, of course, which we know is the most diverse line that Rolex has ever done. So it makes it very, very complex. And then because Rolex is tied to perpetual movement, this watch is actually manual wound. So something that is very odd in the bunch of Rolex. And, when we sit down with you, we'll kind of dive into your odd thought process and how you process and are one of the greatest designers that is out today,
I appreciate that.
Yes.
Big shoes to fill.
I've been working on it a long time.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say we have to just be distinctive, though. I'm a very great designer, but I've only designed one watch that's on the market.
Yes.
So
Facts.
Clear
but
about
you
that.
design many different types of products, which we'll get into tonight.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
I think, the title is fitting. I mean, having followed your work, I admit I am a fan. I think that you have an amazing eye. We'll get into all that.
Thank you.
I'm wearing a new watch. I'm wearing a new watch. Oh my God. I haven't really talked about this yet. If you follow me on Instagram, you've seen it. I'm wearing a new Patek Philippe perpetual calendar, 5140R. Thank you. This is a piece, I thought I was done collecting watches last year, 3 months into the new year, and I've already got two. So that obviously isn't letting up. But I got this through a pal of mine down in Florida, and two really great friends of mine. And, I've always wanted a perpetual. This came across their desk. I kind of got to see it via a conversation I was having with them, and I decided to pull the trigger. And I'm not getting emotional. My eyes are just watering up. But,
You don't have to lie, bro. You don't have to
no, it's, man, I love it. I've worn it all during the trip here in Switzerland. And it's just a great piece. It's turning into something that I feel like I can wear every day. I did change the strap on it. We talked about it yesterday when we visited Patek, but Patek's rose gold is just really, really nice.
special.
And no, very, very pleased. This episode of WCP is sponsored by Bezel, a trusted marketplace for buying and selling watches. With over 18,000 and counting watches listed from both private sellers and professional dealers, you have your pick of the litter from brands like Rolex, AP, Patek, and more. Bezel is one of the highest rated marketplaces for watches. Inside the Bezel app, you can make offers on watches, buy them outright, bid at auction, all with confidence knowing each timepiece is authenticated by an in-house team of experts. For more information, visit getbezel.com or search Bezel in the App Store and download the app today. You have something special on the wrist.
Yeah, this is the Moser Venturer Vanta Black.
Yes.
I don't know if I haven't seen very many around, but I'm lucky to have one. I got it about 4 years ago, 3-4 years ago. And it was a celebration piece. I got it to commemorate building the Pavilion of African Diaspora.
Oh, it's awesome.
For the London Design Biennale. So, I had to show up with the blackest watch. so I got the Vanta Black, and yeah, it's special every time I wear it. Honestly.
No, that watch is awesome. And for those that don't know, Vanta Black is it's this material that is it's scientifically called the blackest black.
It's the blackest black.
It absorbs, I think, 99.9% light.
Yeah.
And so what you get when you use it for a dial is a really, really cool effect where the hands on the dial kind of look like they're floating and just like hovering over like nothingness.
Exactly.
And it's a killer piece. I'm a big fan of Moser. We know the company fairly well. Know the product even better. And I think this might be the first Moser we've had in the show.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think so.
Nice.
It's an amazing timepiece. I'm always impressed by the brand and what they do. And them rolling out the Vanta Black dials and using it in a number of different models, I thought was just an amazing design choice. And again, another choice that shows that you have an eye.
It's about being different.
Absolutely.
I don't see very many around because, A, they're limited. B, it's not flashy for what it is. It's like, I know it's Vanta Black. If somebody looks really closely, they could tell that there's something special about it.
Right.
But it doesn't really call too much attention. It kind of flies under the radar.
No, definitely. Definitely. So you are from Pasadena, California.
Correct.
How the hell did you wind up in Switzerland?
Oh, man. Well, it's a long story. Let's see.
Well, obviously, design is what brought you here.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think it was a part education, part work.
Correct. So I was working in Singapore right after I did my bachelor's, and at a certain point I realized that my skills were kind of best placed in the context of luxury. I was always about storytelling in my design. I always felt like there was kind of a magical or spiritual power that goes into objects, and the place where I saw that best expressed was in the space of luxury. And Switzerland is a hub for that.
Yeah.
There's a master's program at the ECAL that's like at the time was the only master's in luxury. So I made that jump.
Nice.
And it was just supposed to be for school. And I was a watch fan before. And then once I got to Switzerland and it was all around me, I was like, yo, what do I got to do to stay?
Then from staying to how do I actually get to acquire these
How do I get
timepieces?
some watches, and how do I stay around the watches?
Yeah.
It's great to see you guys here. This is my, 2024? This is my 10th time in Geneva for this. It started when I moved here, and I've come every single year since then. Yeah, since 2014. And used to go to Bosworld as well, but now it's all here, and it's awesome having you guys here. It's
Glad
been a
to
fun
be
couple
here.
days.
So in talking about your background and primarily your philosophy and approach towards design, there was something that you said that really resonated with me, and I think speaks to not only your approach to creating, but your approach to collecting. And you once said something along the lines of, I reject the idea or the notion that art should not be or cannot be useful. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about your personal philosophy on design, in relation to the fact that like creating or accumulating objects to share your space with and how they can have a positive impact on your environment.
Yeah. I mean, the funny thing about that statement is it goes both ways, right?
Okay.
Like an object doesn't need to be useless in order to be art. Mm-hmm. And an object doesn't need to be useful in order to have a function, so to speak, right? So when I think about what art is and the importance of art and being an artist, it's really, you're serving the purpose to make objects that allow people to at least temporarily kind of escape the mundane and like what we got to do to navigate this space and tap into the also real, very real layer of the sublime. Okay. Right? So, you go to a museum and you'll see somebody standing in front of a piece of art and they're moved, right? They're mostly moved. They might not know what the artist was painting exactly. They weren't there. They weren't part of the process, but hundreds of years later, the emotion is translated. Yeah. They're no longer, confined by these walls. They're in a direct dialogue that emotionally impacts them, right? Mm-hmm. And that's a function that does something. Yeah. So, but there's this idea that it needs to be useless to be luxury and to be art, right? So then when you make objects or design, the assumption is because it's useful, it's no longer playing that same role that a piece of art would. Right. But every object has the power to do that. But it's just layered into it is the understanding that it's also supposed to do some kind of mundane function like tell the time. Yeah. And this is where watches become very, very particular in that, right? Because it's like, if we're sitting here, we're on a podcast about mechanical watches, watches. Right. We're sitting here with mechanical watches. Mm-hmm. Some of them, we got to wind them in the morning. Yes. And set them very rudimentally, right? Yes. And a lot of times we're setting them based on what it says on our cell phone, which we carry in our pocket. That gives us an accurate time, right? Yes. So obviously we're walking around with functional pieces of design. Yeah. But we're wearing them because of the art. We're wearing them because of how it makes us feel, what it expresses to us, to the world, to everyone else. Yeah. And in that sense, what is it more functional than it is art, or is it more art than it is function? And that's where I find watches are that beautiful kind of intersection.
That's really interesting. And I think, giving consideration to how you just described this, one of the things that, I want to ask you is sort of, if you can break down your process in which you approach creating and designing, right? So, like, we know that there's this interconnectedness, right? Yeah. And that we talked about, like, art sharing a space with objects, how they make you feel. They can kind of like have a positive impact on your spirit. I know, speaking to most artists, when you are creating, considering all of that, there's a dialogue that you're trying to get at, right? There's a conversation that you want to extend beyond the product into the person's life. How do you what is your method in sort of like, what are you trying to say? And how do you consolidate that into a product? And I'm going somewhere with this. This is what I want you to
I mean, it's a big question. Yes. Honestly, it could be a big answer, and I've tried different ways of answering this, but I think the simplest way to answer your question directly is just to say empathy, right? Okay. So there's an idea that there's only one story to be told and only one message to convey, but it gets conveyed in an innumerable number of ways, right? If you start with that premise, and then you develop a certain amount of empathy, then I don't go into a design project trying to figure out what I'm trying to say I'm trying to figure out what they're needing to hear. And that's where empathy comes in, where I can say, with all of my experiences, what can I connect to, and what is this object between us that we have an understanding of what it is, that I can try to have empathy for you to show you that I'm seeing the same thing. And then I put it there for you, right?
Yeah.
To kind of convey what I feel like is one singular message, which is kind of like an ultimate unity, you know, of things. So if I'm able to illustrate how we feel the same about a singular thing from opposite sides, and I'm seemingly on the side of creating and you're on the side of receiving, but then we can reverse that and you can feel like you contributed to that because it's exactly what you want in your space, right?
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden, every time you use that object, or you sit on that sofa, or you use the table, or you wear the watch, you're reminded of this idea of, like, at least in one moment you connected with an artist and you felt what they were saying. And that kind of breaks the barrier, if that makes sense.
No, it totally does.
Yeah.
And so now what I think is interesting is, and, you know, we haven't had too many discussions with artists on our platform, but I think, you know, as someone who is not in your profession, I'm kind of like under the belief, without putting a lot of thought into it, that artists are here to serve, that artists are here to give. And it is very much part of the artist's spirit to want to give and to want to deliver that message. It isn't often we find ourselves speaking to someone in your position who also likes to receive that message. And I feel as though this is something that you do through watch collecting, right? Do you feel that sense of kinship? Are you searching for that when you're looking for watches? Like, what moves you?
Definitely. I mean, well, for one, I wholeheartedly believe, whether it's conscious or not, especially with watches, the decisions that we make represent something unsaid about how we feel about ourselves, right?
Okay.
So I'm very aware of it. So there's a certain common thread that you'll just see amongst my watches, especially the dress watches. You know, it's like there's this kind of,
So we were joking, because we've been saying around this whole trip, you're like, I like old man watches.
Yeah.
That's kind of like,
it's like this weird vibe where it's like, you know, when I run into other people that have a similar watch taste or similar watches, they might be like, you know, a 70-year-old Swiss man.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But it's all about simplicity, you know, because to me, there's need, function, simplicity, and like I wouldn't call it minimalism. It's more like essentialism. Right?
Okay.
I'm not necessarily minimalist, but it's like what's essential, and then not needing more than that, and so that your message is clear.
Is it almost like if it's not broke, don't fix it kind of thing?
Yeah. I mean, and I feel that way when I'm wearing this watch because I can barely see the hands.
Yeah.
So it's like so if I need to know if I'm late or not, I look at the sun and I'm like, is it? And that's usually why I'm late. But no, it's kind of more like the message is so clear because you don't have extra stuff.
Yeah.
So it's one of the reasons that I love Journe.
Okay.
Right? Because like with the Journe watch, it's just like, it's straight to it.
Yeah.
There's no extra, there's no fluff. And then everything is considered so that when you do get to a detail, you're like, I didn't even notice that, but that's perfect.
Yeah.
Like when you take off the strap and replace it.
Yeah.
And you have like the curved bar
just
that
very
fits into the
thoughtful.
lugs, and you're like,
Yeah.
thank you. Right? And that's what I mean, where it's like, it's a lot. It's going the extra mile, but it's not extra. It's like, it's exactly enough. And that's just what's essential. So all my watches kind of need to have that. You know what I mean?
It's almost like too, so like when I think about Journe, I think you explained it really well. It's almost like reductive.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's like, it makes me kind of think of like certain artists who kind of like build things up, and then it's like, okay, well, how do I strip this down and just simplify it? And so you have a Journe here. Let's talk about this piece real quick.
Yeah. This is, hey, I mean,
You got
This
you
has
get
been
emotional there.
this has been my favorite watch for a long time.
Yeah.
And I have to be careful because whenever I get a new watch, I started becoming attached to it. But then I always remember that this is still my favorite watch. Yeah. This is a Chronometre Souverain black label in platinum.
This is a special piece.
Very
It's a
special.
very special piece.
That black label happens to be, I mean, Journe is already incredibly rare, right?
Yeah.
Producing just 900 pieces or so a year.
Yeah, and it's a community, to be honest. And, you know, more than the watch, it's a weird thing because, like I said, like you express who you are with your watches.
Yeah.
I think the Journe collectors, we all kind of acknowledge that we're expressing who we are.
Right.
It's a very particular type of person. And it's a special thing to be able to hang at the boutique. You know, we used to, before the pandemic, it was what we were going in every Tuesday for champagne and just talking watches. Or not every Tuesday, the first of every month. And you know, he would show up and we'd be able to chat, and like, you know, everybody just kind of filled with the sense of like exactly what the motto is, like inveni e feci. You know, it's like, yo, I'd like thought of it, invented it, and created it, and made it. You know, like, and like we all kind of were the type of people that have that spirit. So when I wear that watch, like I look at it and it reminds me that like we represent the same kind of archetype, you know, the type of person that sits down, like has an idea, is determined, visualizes it, makes it, and presents it to the world. Boom, and it's done. It's perfect. Find a flaw, I dare you. This is what that watch is saying.
Sean would love you describing that too.
And that's, you know, it reminds me of that. And I when I get the watches are milestones for me as well.
Yeah.
So like, you know, there's certain, we could call them trophies or achievements, you know, like certain things that have happened. And I've been fortunate that, you know, once I started this journey, I've had a sequence of, you know, kind of very milestone moments.
Yeah.
You know, and this was around the time. This was around the time that I did my very first solo show in New York, and was part of the Afrofuturist period room, and got 4 pieces put into the permanent collection of the Metropolitan Museum in New York.
Wow.
So this was all in like a couple months period where I was flying back and forth from Switzerland to New York for each of these events. And yeah, this is a reminder of that moment. Again, with the Afrofuturist period room is a very black moment. I had to get the black dial on that.
You know something that's very, very interesting. Taking a few steps back when we were talking about just your thought process in collecting watches, something that was very interesting when we all sat down together at Patek, and we were hosted by Jean. So shout out to Jean at the Patek Salon. There was something that I found very interesting, and you touched on it, just like the idea of layers and just the concept of anything. And one thing you said when Jean had like brought out a specific piece, I think it might have been the new 5980, you were like, I don't want to try that on. And you said you didn't want to try it on because you don't try on things that you don't that don't attach to you. Yeah. And there was so many layers to it, because when he tried to get you to try it on, he's like, I don't want you to waste your time. Yeah. B, if I try it on, I may or may not like get the energy that I want from it. And I was like very impressed by that, because there's so many people that will go ahead and see that watch and they're like drooling all over it, and they're like, oh, I gotta have it.
I think it's a great point, but I also think that probably comes from, you know, you participating in your craft as long as you have.
Yes.
Right. You're very clear about who you are.
Yeah.
You're very specific about your space and who you share your space with, and what you allow in that space.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think it is an energetic thing. Like this rule started with me like a long time ago when I first wanted to start getting watches. And like, you know, you go to the boutiques. Well, first of all, I was young, you know, young black kid with not the money to buy the watches. I would go into the boutiques just to get the catalogs.
Yeah.
Right. And I knew I was not yet at the point where I even had the vision of where I would have the money to get the watch. So I had to make it a rule not to put it on my wrist
Wow.
and look at it on my wrist and be able to close my eyes and see it on my wrist every night when I went to sleep to possibly make me feel low about myself. Right. So it's like, I'm going to be happy with just having the book and the catalog. And that's when I started studying the watches. That's how I was able to design a watch so quickly. It's because I had spent years. I had a bookshelf full of catalogs earmarked with all my favorite details of all my favorite watches, but I'd never seen them against my wrist. And even my brother was a watch collector. You know, he was playing basketball and he started collecting watches. And you know, obviously there's that first temptation, like, yo, let me borrow your watch for one night. You know what I mean? And you have to fight that temptation and just be like, look, like that's not for me. So from that, I just have these weird rules. Like I don't try on another man's watch. I just don't.
I love that.
I'll hold it, I'll look at it, but I'm not gonna put your watch on my wrist.
Yeah.
What if I want that? Are we gonna fight for it? You know, and then
Especially nowadays, right? It's to the death.
and then in the boutiques, I don't put watches on my wrist that I absolutely know there's no chance I'm gonna buy.
Yeah.
Either it's so astronomically like out of range, or it's just like we were talking about the chronograph. It's like when I get to the point where I need to time something, if my daughter starts running track and field or she starts horse racing, you know, I'll get a chronograph.
Yeah.
And I'll be the only one. They'll have digital stopwatches and all the.
And you're like, nope, I'm ready.
Yo, you know Bezel just launched auctions?
Really?
Yeah, they did. You could bid on watches inside the app. They give you notifications on auction drops, and it's still authenticated. Oh, shoot, I won.
Yo, what you win?
Man, don't worry about me, man. Go download the app. Go visit getbezel.com.
Oh, come on, man.
In life, there are choices and options. Choices set the tone. Options change the mood. And while you aren't able to drive 2 cars, you can, however, travel with 2 watches. Introducing the Shuttle, a traveling watch case in collaboration with WCP and Wolf. Godspeed.
Available at wristcheckpod.com.
I want to go back to talking about design and specifically this piece here.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan. I happen to love this watch, especially the blue dial version. There's something about Journe design that is, and it's exceptional, but it's also very simple. What I love about this piece, first, you know, going back to you talking about you like old man watches.
Yeah.
It's just a perfect circle.
Perfect.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
Like the next thing is you look at the indexes. Again, he's not reinventing anything.
Yep.
They're done exceptionally well. They're prominent. They stand out. The contrast is amazing. When you get to the dial work and the hands, now I appreciate asymmetrical design.
Yeah.
But in a weird way, Journe has a way of achieving symmetry and asymmetry that I don't have the vocabulary to explain. Mm-hmm. I'm curious if this is something that you've noticed too. It sounds like you have, and you have an appreciation for it.
There's tricks, right? That I could. So look, it's not symmetrical. There's nothing symmetrical about it.
There isn't.
It's asymmetrical, but like first of all, you have in your mind, just because of the regularity of the numbers and the fact that you've seen this style so many times, you have an image in your mind of what you're seeing there, regardless of what you're actually seeing. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying I'm an expert. This is just my take on it. So then, like, you know, the power reserve being at 3 o'clock, take away at 3. But in your mind, you can visualize that 3 being there.
Yes.
Right?
You know, it's funny.
You didn't even realize there was no 3. Right?
Exactly.
Boom. And then you get to the seconds down in the sub dial at 7 and 8.
Yeah.
And what does he do? He proportionally streaks in 7 and 8.
Yeah.
This like and even the 9 as well, but just slightly, right? Like these things are just, and just because of like those subtle moves, it's complete. It makes it so it's completely balanced.
Yes.
And I think there's a subliminal trick in your mind where you're seeing what's there, but you're also seeing a superimposed image of all of those things that are asymmetrical not being there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Like so much so, like even this watch and the CB, the Chronometre Blue, you in your mind they're the same dial, but they're not the same dial.
They're not. That's right. No, it's no power.
Yes.
That's so crazy.
Right?
Wow.
And it's something about making something that's like super normal, super elegant, and super standard, and super in line with like the language that you're accustomed to seeing.
Yeah.
Right? Almost like a program language that's in your mind that tells you the code of what you're seeing, regardless of
So
what your
crazy.
receptors are getting, right? So that you come to it with that. And we come to everything with that. That's why design is important.
Yeah.
Like you walk in and you're like, that's a table, right? But if it's slightly slanted and you put your drink on and it slides off, you'll be like, that's a bad table. And it's like, no, that's not a table if it's not flat.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean?
Your
But just because it has
mind, yes.
legs and it has a surface, you think table, right?
Yeah. Wow.
And it's just like that's why design, I think, is important because of how it plays with the assumptions of what something already is, what it's supposed to do. And I love Journe for the asymmetry. And I think like even like in my own work, I play with that a lot.
Yeah.
Like when you look at the chandeliers, that's why people can't like replicate my chandeliers because there's not a logic to it. It's musical. It's like my chandeliers are like Jay Dilla drums. So like the placement of each of the shades, it's like you know the pattern, but then I'm just doing one of these.
Yeah.
I'm just like
it's illogical.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's because like you know what the rhythm is and it feels familiar, but then it has that like wait, that snare is slightly slightly shifted.
That's so funny.
Right.
So, and you have, I guess we should go to the next watch.
Yeah.
So there's an Hermès watch here.
Yes.
And you have a really great relationship with the company. First, let's talk about this timepiece. I'm not too familiar with Hermès timepieces. What are we holding here?
You're holding a slim Hermès.
Okay.
That is my, I shouldn't say this because I designed a watch for them, but that's my favorite Hermès watch.
Okay.
And it's an important part of the story as well because it's the first Hermès watch that caught my attention was the Arceau.
Okay.
And that is an asymmetrical watch. But then this quickly became my favorite. To me, it's purity and elegance and everything that I said before about its directness and communication. But at the same time, when you look at it long enough, those numerals are different.
Yeah.
Right?
It's crazy.
And like, mechanically, you look at the back, you've got the micro rotor. It's got so many things going on that are really cool. And then the price point is like a perfect entry level price point. And it's just an elegant and beautiful watch that represents the Hermès brand quite specifically and watchmaking very specifically. And, it's created by somebody that I would consider a hero of mine, which is Philippe de l'Hotel. And it was a collaboration with, I believe, Philippe Apoloag, a graphic designer who did the numbers on the dial. And, you're familiar with Philippe de l'Hotel's work, but you might not be aware that you're familiar with it because, when you go into the Hermès booth and you look at the watches, he's the creative director of Hermès, the Moser Hermès. So, he's coming up with a lot of concepts and designing them. And he taught me a lot about watchmaking. And that watch is important to me because it represents that education, the Hermès education and the watch design education with Hermès.
Please.
Oh, so speaking of Hermès, we had a lot of time together, and we talked about like the inception of your relationship, and it dates back nearly a decade.
Yeah, close to it.
You had been working with them, and just like design.
It's just on the watch.
Yes,
It started just on the watch. We've played with some other things.
So just on watches, you guys spent a lot of time together, speaking, and of course, this was fresh out of design school, and we kind of talked about like your guerrilla style of like how you got through the door. But once you got there, can you speak to what it was like coming out as a freshly grad student and then working with the most prestigious I think brand house in the world?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, it's strange because like what we were saying about Journe and like, you know, vision and just doing it.
Right.
When I moved from Singapore to Switzerland, I was determined to do work with Hermès.
Mm-hmm.
And the time that I spent in Singapore and understanding luxury, a lot of it was going and seeing the luxury shops, reading a lot of books about luxury and understanding what luxury is and what makes luxury from a spiritual to a business level. And based on that, I was like, there's Cartier and there's Hermès that I feel like are truly representative of what I understood to be luxury.
Right.
And I knew that at Cal, the school that I was going to in the luxury program, that every few years they would surprise the students with an Hermès collaboration. So I was hoping that would happen. Then I got to school and it wasn't our year. But I still had it in my mind, Hermès, this is going to work out, you know. And I talked to Nicolas Lemoine, who's a good friend of mine and the director of the program after I graduated. And I told him, you know, I'm looking for watch opportunities. Everybody knew throughout the program, they're like, this guy loves watches. He wants to do watches. So I was like, is there anything with watches? And he was like, actually, Le Montre Hermès came by. And now all of a sudden, it's like light bulb goes off. Watches and Hermès together. I'm like, can you set that up? He's like, of course. He makes the introduction, puts us on email, and we set up a lunch or set up a coffee.
Okay.
Not even a full lunch. We normally have coffee in Lausanne at the Beau Rivage during the summertime, looking at beautiful weather, looking at the lake. And his broken English and my non-existent French. You know? And we're trying
to be a fly on the wall.
We're like, but surprise, it's a funny thing. When you speak the language of design, everything is understood.
Yeah.
I showed him my book. He opened to a page. You look at it, Taylor, like, I'm like, eh. He's like, eh. I'm like, yeah.
That's so funny.
Boom. He's like, wow. So we're doing that for a while.
Right.
And then, you know, in my mind, I'm like, I just want to get to the factory. I wanted to get back into one of these rooms and watch the watchmakers again.
Yeah.
You know, and then if I can get them to let me do that, then I'm going to ask for an internship, you know, and I'm going to figure out something. And he was like, yeah, I could come and visit. He's like, and when you come visit, if you have an idea for a watch, bring it with you. Wow. that was it.
Yeah.
That was it. He was like, think about a watch.
Yeah.
Like, bring it with you.
Yeah.
And so you designed the Galop,
So I designed,
which was released in 2019.
Correct.
A beautiful timepiece.
Thank you.
I might add. What was the inspiration in designing that piece? What were you trying to convey? I know you had a lot to prove.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you really, I'm sure you was like, I got to bring it. Clearly you brought it because the watch is awesome.
Yes.
Thank you.
But what were you getting at? What was, you know, what were you trying to achieve from a design perspective?
Well, it's with everything that I design. Like I said, I try to unclutter everything and give like a clear message, right? And not just a clear message that's the message from the receiver's standpoint, filtered through my expertise in how I can connect with that end user, right? So the brief was really simple. They're like, we need the next iconic woman's watch.
Wow.
Like, all right, you know, you can do that. But, you know, I'd start doing my research because then I have to connect. So I'm like, well, what does it mean to be like a woman in this day and age, right? It was like 2019 and, you know, like, or at the time it was like 2017. And just the idea of what their previous iconic women's watch was, what women's watches are kind of in the industry. And, you know, I was also one of the assistants at my school. Fiona Kruger was a female watchmaker.
Okay.
So, you know, I'd seen a lot of things and been thinking about a lot of things. And what I realized was like, well, in this day and age, the biggest difference between the last time they did this exercise was the last time they did this exercise, it was kind of a given that the watch would be a gift.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So I was like, well, if this is going to be an entry-level watch that a woman's going to buy for herself, who's that entry-level woman that's going to buy this watch for herself? So then I started thinking about my friends, started thinking about like the women that I knew that like had the jobs that they would be like, oh, I'm going to go get that instead of getting a Rolex, right? There's going to be a certain level of like confidence and, you know, capability as well as a layer of femininity that's going to say, like, I don't need to just get a Rolex just because I'm in the office with a bunch of, guys that wear Rolexes, or just because it's a symbol of whatever it's a symbol of in the business world. And I went through a very fun process of compiling images of women from major cities into folders.
Okay.
Right? So like I went Milan,
right, and
then I just started gathering like images of powerful women. Then I went like Tokyo, same thing. And then there was also like there were effeminate men that were like that were like on the go, that were doing these things, and a lot of it was like during fashion weeks and during moments when they were like big events in New York or wherever. And I took all these images, and then I just went through them and started analyzing them, and I realized almost all of them people were moving. And that's why I got that feeling that like, that's a powerful person, right? That's a powerful woman.
Yeah.
They were always moving. They were always moving. The clothes were always blowing in the wind. It was always like a direction. Their eyes were always looking at something. And so, and again, you have all these inputs, then I have to bring it into one message.
Yeah.
So then the essence of Hermès, and the reason that their logo is what it is because they started as making the hardware for connecting horses to carriages that were meant to go fast.
Yeah.
They were like the Pininfarina of the time.
Yeah.
So they have this in their DNA. Motion, movement, going, fast, speed, and that's where the surfaces and the reflections and the elegance come into all of their objects, because they're meant to be hardware that are not supposed to slow down the horse.
Yeah.
So it comes from the geometry of the horse's body. So
that's so fascinating to me too.
Fast watch.
It really is, because, you guys, you named the Galop.
Yeah.
Right. But even without knowing the name, I remember when I first saw this piece, there's something incredibly equestrian about this.
And fast.
And fast. Yeah.
It's a stirrup silhouette.
Yeah.
So when you look at it as a silhouette,
right,
and you just go black and white, it's the shape of a stirrup. And the stirrup is an object that came into existence at the same time across the world in different cultures, even though they didn't have conversations with each other.
Wow.
Yes.
When human beings said, we need to be transported on the back of a horse, and we need to climb into a saddle, like you go through the steps, they all came to the conclusion, they're all decorated differently, but they're all shaped the same. And when I went to visit Hermès, and I went to the office of the founder of Hermès, he had a collection of stirrups from around the world, from every different culture.
Wow.
So I was like, that's a symbol of Hermès. It represents speed. It represents its power. It represents what I'm thinking about, like women in this day and age. It created an aerodynamic, symmetrical shape that feels asymmetrical because it's not round. Put the crown at the base so it doesn't slow them down. The numerals are done in force perspective, so they get smaller toward the top, so that it feels like you're moving in motion.
Forward,
And then it's curved to fit on a woman's wrist elegantly, so that actually, unlike circular watches and square watches, a woman can be walking and turn her wrist like this, read the time without slowing down. With a circular watch or a square watch, you kind of have to stop, read it. But with this watch, you can go like that and keep going. So, and I made it in a size that is comfortable, that it can be somewhat androgynous and fit between, like.
And I was going to say that too, because it is. It feels like very unisex. Like it's not. It doesn't have to be gender.
Right. It's not specific, and this is intentional as well, because again, it's just saying one thing. Like I said, all I'm saying is that to some degree, we have things in common.
Yeah.
Just remember that, right? So there's a unity. There's unity. You can, if you're religious, you call it God. If you're scientific, you call it carbon. There's something in all of us, right?
Yes.
So like, if I can tap into that thing, then it's cool, and there's no reason. So that's another reason why, like for the press runs, I was wearing the watch, right? And like, I'm not like Arnold Schwarzenegger, but I'm not that effeminate of a dude, and I can wear that watch, right?
So something that you brought up and you beat me to it, right? The idea of like art and science and perception and all of those things, and how they're all married, right? Because, like you said, you can say God, but then at the same time, you have to marry it with science. Like you have to, like one does not exist without the other.
Yeah.
And when you created this timepiece, I thought about not only you sitting there as a designer, but also the fact of science, how the numerals are going up in a way of motion.
Yeah.
And how you thought to meticulously have it that way so that if someone is on the go and if they are in motion, that they will never be able to stop where they are.
Yeah, they don't have to. I can't never fully take credit for any of my creations. I've got to be honest. Like, I go into a flow state. I'm in the zone. I feel like I'm just a vessel for my higher power to speak. That's really the truth. So all of these things just kind of happen,
Right.
Yeah.
You know, where it's like I was just making decisions off intuition and it all worked. It's like, well,
Right.
you made a curved watch that curves to a point. The numbers go like this. And then I put it on, I was like, whoa, this just works. And it's in line with the concepts. Everything is like, it's perfect.
It's a unique thing. I think, especially, I think you explained it well when you said, the number one thing that you keep in mind is like empathy.
Yeah.
And you're thinking about essentially the end user. And there's like a mystic bridge that's connected before the product is probably even created. And it's just like, okay, I'm here. Whoever that person is there. How do we come together? And that's where the magic happens.
And then the object sits is like the connection of all of it.
Yeah. Did you name it the Galop?
Yeah.
The Galop?
I think when I presented it the last time, it was called the Galop, I believe. No. The last time, the last name that I presented was Le Chevalier. Le Chevalier, I'm not even saying it properly. It's like the female cavalier. And then we had some back and forths, and Galop is something that's already in the Hermès DNA.
Got it.
So then we went with Galop.
What was it like when you finally, you finished it and you said, okay, this is done, and you presented it?
I feel like it was never, like when I thought it was done and I presented it, they were like, this is great. It's not right yet.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Thank God for Vincent Sauver, graphic designer, also a graduate of the Cal.
Okay.
He worked together with me to get the numerals right.
Okay.
I presented a version with numerals that I had designed that were pretty good, and they had the concept, but they weren't perfect yet. So then, he came in, we worked together. I think he had literally just graduated, and I had come and given a talk at a Cal, and he knew that I was working with Hermès. And after I'd given the talk, I came out, he gave me his business card. He was like, yeah, I've talked to a couple of people at Hermès. I really like what you do. Just if you ever want to work on anything, give me a ring.
Wow.
So then when they were like, yeah, we really need to kind of fix some things. Like, the numbers are almost there, but it's not quite right. I was like, well, like, would it be okay to bring somebody else in? And Philippe Delotal had already been speaking to him about doing it. They were working on his graduate project. And he was like, yeah, I know Vincent. And I was like, yeah, what if we tried? And we tried it. And it worked out perfectly. Like, he and I had a couple of meetings just sitting over coffee and beer, sketched on the napkin. And then he went and then he turned it into what it needed to be. And then he sent it to me, and he's doing Swiss typefaces, so he's meticulous.
Yeah.
So I would take what he sent me, and then I'd go in Illustrator and just like squeeze shit and like piss him off, and he'd be like, oh, wait, boy, what is going on? But we did a great job, and eventually it was right. And thank you to Pierre Alexis Dumas. He made sure that we never settled for anything less than what would be perfect.
I think that's fantastic, actually, because what it says to me, and the timepiece is beautiful, but I think what's really cool is you have this amazing, prestigious brand, and you could deliver, this is my best work.
Yeah.
And they're so in tune with who they are that they can tell you it can be better.
Yeah.
Let's push it further.
Yeah.
That's got to do something for you as a designer too.
Yeah, and especially since, like, you have to understand, this isn't just a mythic brand in their advertising.
Yeah.
It's a mythic brand on the inner workings too. Half the time, it felt like people were speaking to me in riddles and codes and philosophy with nothing
They're like
concrete.
very esoteric. Yeah.
I'll tell you this, and this is where I think they get the best out of people. At no point did anybody say, "Do this."
Interesting.
right? It would just be, it's not, it could be better. And then riddles. like riddles and weird conversations and pictures. And, you know, I would go to Paris often and just sit in the office of this woman, Delphine de Rome. I would just sit in her office, and she's like out of a movie, you know, like just, you know, a ton of experience, quirky style, like big black glasses, like black rim plastic glasses, and talking about a minute, knows everything about Hermès, and was just pulling pictures out of archives and just showing me things. And look at this, think about that, taking me to tea, asking me questions about life, and then I would leave. And there was nothing concrete that was told to me, but all this stuff was floating in the soup. Right? So, and that's the way that they work. And of course, you're going to get kind of magic. They select people carefully, and they guide and they grow.
Yeah.
I mean, it was kind of like they were helping me get to become a better designer. It worked out perfectly because I think we overlap and we align.
Yeah.
If we weren't aligned, then I don't think it would work so well. But I think that kind of the spirit of what I do and the spirit of what they do kind of matches. So
I mean, it has to, especially like this was like your first big project, like right out of school.
Yeah.
And how crazy is it that it's with like Hermès? Like for a lot of people, that's like end level goal.
Yeah.
And it's like, yo, we went right to there, and now we're getting busy doing a bunch of other things.
People are like, you haven't done any other watches? I was like, man, I did one good one.
Yeah.
It's a lot of pressure. You know what I mean? Like, give me a minute.
At least be able to enjoy this moment.
You know, actually, watch design isn't really that much of a young guy's game. I mean, it is now with independent brands, and I like that.
Yes.
I like that.
Yeah.
But even those guys are mostly watchmakers.
Yeah.
Simon Brett, that guy did some crazy stuff.
I mean, he
did some
knocked
crazy
it out
stuff.
the park with the first one.
Yeah.
That was some
He really
crazy
did.
stuff.
Now the pressure's on.
Yeah.
Hit him again.
And this is where I take the approach of like I don't swim in the same lake too much.
Yeah, I feel like
You know what I mean? Like after I did a watch, like I'm not gonna come back with another watch. Let me go do a chair.
Exactly.
And then I'm gonna go do some drinks.
Yeah.
And then there we go. Some drinks.
He beats us to it.
You are, you know, in addition to, you know, what your practice and what you do, you're still dabbling in the product field.
Yeah, of course.
Mass,
not just dabbling.
market product. You're in it.
Never stop. Yeah.
And so you're entering in the spirits world
Yeah.
with some pretty interesting people.
Yeah. So in February, after the Super Bowl, we launched Gin and Juice by Dre and Snoop.
Yeah.
And I'm fortunate, I'm blessed. Might be a dream.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I grew up in LA in the 90s. And yeah, it was definitely a dream. Like, yeah, someday I'm going to work with Dr. Dre.
Yeah.
And then, like, when we all
And
started.
most people hear that, they think, like, yeah, I'm going to be spitting some raps.
Yeah, exactly.
making beats.
Man, we were making beats. And, like, I remember when we would make beats and, like, somebody would come in the studio with the CD, like, yo, I got Dre's drums.
Yeah.
And we really believed that they had it. It was like, but yeah, it's a dream. And again, it's like perfect confluence of events. You know, a mentor, Mark Byers, shout out to him. He set it up and he made the introduction. And I think one of the things that I pride myself in is that like people like him that take care of me and like open doors for me and like give me a protective shield, that what I can do is to make sure that I follow through with the highest level of delivery.
Right.
Like I deliver the product, right?
Yeah.
I have to make sure that it's that level, it's that good. So when he brought this opportunity, you know, it was set up to be great. Cause it was like, I didn't have to think. I didn't have to think about it. I'd never designed packaging or a can before. Never done anything in this space. But the DNA, like I joke with Dre and with with his communications, Lori. I told her name's Lori Earl, and she was telling me stories about what it was like back then. She's I think she's Armenian from Glendale. She's representing Death Row and Dre and Snoop.
Wow.
And I was like, wait, so you put together the source cover? She's like, are you kidding me? She's telling me stories about like Snoop in the van and this and that. I'm like, wait, so your communication shaped how I see things.
Yeah.
Right?
Wow.
Like what you guys were doing back then.
Yeah.
It shaped how I see things. Like Dre's approach and the mystique of Dre. That's like the same archetype as the Journe, as like all these people that we talked about. I feel connected to that.
Right.
Where it's like it shouldn't go out if it's not perfect. I'm like, it's gonna be perfect, right? It's gonna communicate clearly.
Yes.
Like you're gonna be able to flip it over, turn it inside out. It's gonna be perfect. It's gonna be all those things. And if we only make a certain number of them, then it's fine. And like you don't need to do everything, but you need to do everything right.
Yes.
Right? And it needs to bang.
Yeah.
That's Dre. That's what we grew up with. It's like we got the chronic. You're like front to back. Can't stop. I graduate from high school. We got 2001. I'm like, what is going on? This is like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's how it can't be anything less than that. So so the concept for this thing, it was like, well, gin and juice, that's it. What I'm making is an announcement that it's finally here.
Yeah.
Right? So that's why it's just like bold title, Gin and Juice by Dre and Snoop. And like the typeface, I worked with Hassan Rahim, and he was like, we got to think about like hype posters, like when you used to pull off the freeway and you had the poster just like DJ such and such, right? So it was like bam, bold, and then like the car illustrated by Wayne Johnson, who's an old friend of mine, and like I just kind of was able to pull it together, and I thought if I'm gonna design this to be a representative of what this culture means to me, this culture that I grew up in, that shaped me, that shaped how so many people see things around the world at this day and age, that it survived this long, it's been so influential, it can be looked at as nothing less than how we look at something that's luxury. Right? It has a spiritual and geographic home. It has an essence that makes you feel something, and it transports you when you think about it.
It does.
It's lasted the test of time. And just like Hermès started with what it started with and then spread into everything else, we're seeing the same thing happen here. Yeah. Right? So in that sense, I was like, well, how do we make that announcement to the world with the very first product? Because there's going to be more. We put it the same way that you would find it if it was in a gallery or a museum 100 years from now. Yeah. So I was like, white space, drop the car in there, put the announcement, Gin and Juice is here. Yeah. And it was obvious. Yeah. It came really quickly, and it was like, man, that's all it needs to be. Yeah. Just like Dr. Dre, you look at the Chronic 2001, what do you got? Green border, 2001 Leaf. Yeah.
Exactly.
Straight to the point.
Like it didn't even need to say Chronic. You're like, the Chronic.
Exactly.
And it was just obvious. I didn't have to second guess it. Dre jokes. He was just like, man, you just like the one-hitter quitter. He's like, you just knock him out. It's like you show up with one idea, knock him out the park. I'm like, man, it's just when it's right and it's direct, there's not a lot of room for confusion, which is what I was saying about being essential.
Your story is so amazing, because it's like, how crazy is it for this kid to come out of California, Los Angeles, California, Pasadena, California, go into the design field where there's already like geographically not a lot of people from where you grew up coming into the space, get in there, go through like one of the top schools, make it to Switzerland, design a watch with like one of the most prestigious brands, and then get connected with the hometown hero that brings you back home.
Brings you back home.
Yes.
To like really what kicked it all off. When this record came out,
it kicked it off.
Like,
I was,
okay,
Doggy Style.
LA is here.
When I tell you, my mom found the Doggy Style CD, and it was a prayer meeting right after.
And now you'll be like, look, Mom, we're back.
I'm back with Snoop. Now Snoop he's family brand. But and the Chronic, that was the first record I ever What, Dre Day was the first record I ever memorized. Nothing But a G Thing was the second memorized. Like, I used to know the Chronic album front to back.
Yeah.
Then and honestly, it's not, to me, there's no such thing as a coincidence at this point.
Yeah,
right?
no.
There's no, to me, there was nothing more elite than Dre.
Yeah.
That was it. We like Snoop Dogg's raps.
Yeah.
I loved listening to the Dog Pound.
Yeah.
But Dre is that guy.
Yes.
You get what I
Proven
mean?
it time and time again.
Like when Breezy Lovejoy turns into Anderson .Paak, and then the world needs to meet him. Dre's
he's
look
like
at this guy. Right?
I would say Dre he's like our Quincy Jones.
Yeah.
He's the Quincy Jones of hip hop.
Yeah. Wait till they make the Dre documentary, bro.
Yeah. It's gonna be nuts.
My man, I want to say thank you. This has been a real pleasure.
Yeah.
It's been awesome getting to know you these last couple of days. Like truly, like spending time with you and getting to know you.
Appreciate that.
I think you are an amazing designer. I'm a big fan of your work. I might have to stop buying watches for a while so I can afford one of your lamps. But this is fantastic. Thank you.
Bro,
we got some more
appreciate
partying to do before we leave.
Yep.
Yes, we do.
Yes, we do.
And this has been another episode of Wrist Check Pod. For those who are watching and listening, you guys know where to find us. Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, audio and visual. We are also on YouTube. We're on TikTok for the children, Instagram at Wrist Check Pod. And like my man here likes to say, maybe one day you'll find us in the metaverse. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. Later.
Peace.
Peace.